The only place that gives you 757 high school and college sports talk on a nightly basis. It's the 757 at 6 on ESPN Radio 94.1.
And at this time here on the 757 at 6, we're joined by a special guest, college football guru, ESPN insider. He's the football forecaster extraordinaire. Check out the website for all the great things he does, philsteele.com. That's PhilSteele.com, and follow him on Twitter at PhilSteele042. It's the college football Bible, and Phil Steele joins us here on the 757 at 6 on ESPN Radio 94.1. Even with all the craziness that's been going on in our world, it's great to talk with you because we can get that escape for a bit and talk some college football, sink our teeth into the teams and players. How you been?
I am doing great, Matthew. How about yourself?
I'm hanging in there. It's been a long, tough 4+ months here with this pandemic, but we're all looking forward to the magazine here. I know it's out on new shelves now, correct?
That's right. And, two ththings have changed with the distribution this year, Matthew. Number one is we printed a lot less copies. So, as opposed to going everywhere to get the magazine like you could in the past, the only places to get it this year are Barnes & Noble and Books A Million. And we only printed 50,000 copies rather than the 200,000 we normally print. So Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, the only places that you could go out and find it. And the second thing that changed was how long it took to do the magazine. Normally we send the last page of the press at the end of May. This year we sent the last page of the press July 8th. I was sitting in an empty office for a month and a half in March and April, wondering if we were going to get back to rolling. And then the staff came back with a vengeance and got to talk to all the coaches and put this thing out. But I tell you, after talking to the coaches, I'm pretty fired up. We're going to have a football season.
Yeah, I'm keeping my fingers and toes crossed as well. I'm looking forward to chatting about some of these teams around the Commonwealth like Old Dominion, Virginia Tech, Liberty, and many more with you here. But before we do that, Phil, you kind of hit on it a little bit. I don't think people truly realize just how much time you pour into the creation of this incredible magazine with you and your staff, the blood, sweat, and tears. It's the absolute best year in and year out. Take us behind the scenes a bit in terms of how much greater of a challenge was it this year with all that's going on concerning the pandemic, uncertainty with college football, and all to get it done and do it the meticulous way you like to get it done.
Yeah, and it's normally a three right-through process. And this year we start the Sunday after Thanksgiving when some teams' seasons are complete. We can go through every article that was written about that team the past season, really get a good feel for how that team was and is and what happened to them, and then write that first right-through. And that's back in November and in December. Then we've got January, February roll around. We start the second right-through process of it, get the information for the schools, get the signees added in. And that's when it came to a grinding halt, was when they shut down the offices in Ohio, and we were in an empty office. I was in an empty office for about a month and a half. But then once the staff was able to return, they came back in with a vengeance. And we talked to 110 head coaches out there, plus. I believe it was over 110 this year. And I got to go through each of the teams with them like I normally do. I got all the information correct on all the pages. And just like always, 130 team pages, each page, 2 full pages on each team, complete. It's like getting a media guide, but all the information's in the same spot on every page. But it took till July 8th as opposed to the end of May. So about 7.5 months of work as opposed to 6 like years past.
Well, it's a year-round reference guide before the season, during the season, and after the season with Phil Steele's College Football Magazine. He's so kind of joined us here on the 757 at 6 on ESPN Radio 94.1. All right, let's get to the teams now, Phil. It feels like Virginia Tech goes into this season in some ways where UVA was a year ago. Expectations high with so much returning, a lot of pressure on the coaching staff to deliver a big year, even contend for a spot in the ACC championship. Meanwhile, UVA kind of flying under the radar after finally beating the Hokies for the first time in 15 tries or so. Is that an accurate way of looking at it, and what do you see in Virginia and Virginia Tech?
Yeah, absolutely. That is the way to look at it this year. And when I look at Virginia Tech, I see a dangerous team. Remember them last year offensively struggling early in the year, averaged about 19.9 points per game. The first 4 Power 5 opponents they had. Then Hendon Hooker came off the bench, and all of a sudden Virginia Tech had an offense. And after that, they averaged 34.3 points per game. Well, Hooker's back, 8 returning starters on offense. And I did have a question at the end of last year. I mean, Bud Foster, in my mind, one of the best defense coordinators in the nation. And losing him, I thought was going to be tough. But, going back and talking to Coach Foster 2 years ago and going over the team with them, they were extremely young defense. They couldn't afford injuries, and then they lost the players they couldn't afford to lose. And so last year they showed great improvement. They went from allowing 31 points per game to 24. This year, 10 starters are back on D. And it's not like Justin Hamilton has to learn the defense. He was there last year. In fact, he's been at VT for the last couple of years. So he knows the players inside and out, and I think he's going to do just fine there. They are my number 5 most experienced team in the country. So to me, the most improved division in college football is the Coastal Division. And Virginia Tech's one of those poster boys this year for being that most improved division. And then with Virginia, there's one guy that's a little upset about where they're getting picked this year, and that's Coach Mendenhall. Talking to him, he's like, I'm not sure why everybody's picking this so low. And you look at them last year and you thought, hey, Bryce Perkins was the offense, and Bryce Perkins is gone, right? So they're going to struggle. Well, he likes Brennan Armstrong. He likes Keaton Thompson and the overall offense they have returning this year. And remember, defensively, Virginia was solid. They only gave up 19.7 points per game the first 7 games, and then injuries wiped out the secondary. They gave up 34.5 points per game the last 7 games. I think you're going to see a good defense. Coach Mendenhall feels they're going to be representative on offense even without Bryce Perkins, and play people like myself who are picking Virginia lower in the ACC Coastal this year might be a little disappointed in that fact at the end of the year if Coach Mendenhall's correct.
Hey, you could be right. You never know. ESPN Radio 94.1, of course, is the home for Old Dominion football. So naturally, let's talk some Monarchs here with Phil. And we know the job that Bobby Wilder did building the thing from scratch. They have a new head coach there at ODU with Ricky Ronnie coming in from Penn State. He takes over a situation where there's really nowhere to go but up as the Monarchs hit rock bottom last year. What's your forecast in the short term, and can you envision them being a bowl team as well as a conference contender by year 2 or year 3 under Ronnie with the way they're starting to make a dent in recruiting?
Yeah, I think the possibility clearly exists. And I think Old Dominion has a chance to be a better team than even I expect this year, and based on the experience. And let me tell you, talking to all the coaches out there, it is extremely tough for a first-year head coach this year coming in, not having the benefit of spring practices. You want to see your players on the field. You want to learn a little bit about them, and they didn't get that benefit. But the one thing Ricky Ronnie has above all the other first-year head coaches is he's got a vastly more experienced team than last year. I mean, last year, ODU had just 9 returning starters. They were number 128 on my experience chart. And last year, they also had a better defense than you would expect out of a 1-11 team. They gave up 371 yards per game, but they also took on some key opponents, and I thought that the defense played well. Well, this year, they're all the way up to number 7 on my experience chart. They have 17 returning starters coming back. They've got 4 different quarterbacks that started. They've got 4 different running backs that started. It's a veteran team. So that's going to be a plus, I think, to the changeover of the first-year head coach. I still did pick Old Dominion last in the East this year, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if they're a better team than expected. And, yeah, I think he can get this thing turned around. I thought, last year was a very inexperienced squad, and this year's a very experienced squad.
You just hit on it with Ricky Ronnie there at ODU. As the case is every year, Phil, there are a host of new coaches in college football at the FBS level. I believe it's something like 24 in total, and some big-name programs and big-name coaches. Look at places like Florida State and Michigan State and Ole Miss and Mississippi State and others. Who's set up to have the most success right away?
I'm going to take a look at the coaches I felt were the happiest with what they inherited. That would probably be Florida State. I mean, Marvin Wilson coming back was a big thing for Coach Norvell there, and that's a big get there. And then you look at them offensively, they've got a veteran unit, a veteran offensive line. They've struggled on offensive line in recent years. But I think you could see Florida State making a big-size improvement this year, even with a first-year head coach, because let's face it, his offenses always do well when they've got talented, speedy, skilled players. Florida State's got talented, speedy, skilled players. And then out in the Mountain West, the one that surprised me, talking to Coach Todd Graham, going over the Hawaii squad with him, he was pleasantly surprised. I mean, generally first-year head coaches come in, like, give you an example. I talked to Jeremy Pruitt at Tennessee his first year. Wasn't enamored with the talent he was inheriting. It wasn't Alabama. It wasn't Georgia. Here's Graham coming from the Pac-12, and he's thrilled with his offensive line, thrilled with the team's attitude, thrilled with everything he's got coming back at Hawaii. I think Hawaii might be, I know they made it to the Mountain West title game last year, but I think they're going to have a better year than expected, even with a first-year head coach.
Interesting one right there with Hawaii. I like it. Phil Steele here on the 757 at 6 on ESPN Radio 94.1. Do yourself a favor and follow him on Twitter at PHILSTEELE042. Also the website, philsteele.com. Go get the College Football Preview magazine. You will not be disappointed. I promise you. It'll take you a long time to set it down once you pick it up here on the 757 at 6. We continue to go through the world of college football with Phil here on ESPN Radio 94.1. And Phil, Notre Dame always has national appeal, as you know, and actually one of their standouts defensively hails from our area in Hampton Roads with Jeremiah Owusu out of Bethel High School in Hampton, someone that could be a future NFL draft choice. How big of a player are Brian Kelly's Fighting Irish for this coming season in your eyes, and the big keys, question marks to them being among the nation's elite?
You know, I think they have the talent to get back there. Remember 2 years ago, I had Notre Dame as my number one surprise team, a non-top 10 team I thought could contend for a playoff spot, and they, of course, got there. And when you look at this year's squad, they've got a veteran quarterback, Ian Book. There are some question marks of running back, but it's not like they're replacing a 1,000-yard back. I think they've got good replacements there. The offensive line is what they're probably hanging their hat on there. They have my number 3 rated offensive line in the country. All 5 starters are back, and if you've got a veteran quarterback and an offensive line like that, and the skill players they have good skill players. It should be one of the better offenses out there. And defensively, you talk about one of the guys on the defense, even though they only have 5 returning starters, I think they're loaded on the defensive side of the ball as well. So this is a good Notre Dame team. I'd say better than last year's Notre Dame team. And last year's Notre Dame team is pretty much true to form. They were favored in 11 games. They won 11 games. They were a dog in 2 games at Georgia, at Michigan. They lost those 2 games. If you look at the schedule this year for Notre Dame, the games they might be an underdog in would, of course, be the Clemson game at home. But other than that, all the other games right in the category. You wonder a little bit about the schedule. Who's going to replace a USC? Who's going to replace a Stanford? Who's going to replace a Wisconsin on the schedule? Because the Pac-12 and the Big Ten are not playing non-conference games. And that might determine whether or not they can make the playoff.
You just hit on something there, Phil, with the non-conference games and everything kind of following up here. How much do your rankings and things change based on the news and information you get? I mean, everybody do rankings, whether it's professional, college, high school, you name it. They change with more information that comes your way. How much do they shift for you, a lot or just a little?
Well, the beautiful thing is, Matthew, that even if we go to conference-only play across the board, my forecasts since I believe it was the 3rd year of the magazine have been based on conference records. Okay. Because there's a site out there, Stassen.com, which determines the accuracy of the magazines, and it based it on conference records. So I changed it to conference records as opposed to overall records. To give you an example, USC this year is playing Alabama and Notre Dame in the non-conference slate. It didn't bother me at all. What bothered me was conference play. So if you pick up my magazine and you're reading the rankings of where I have the teams ranked in each conference, they're all still the same, even if we're just playing conference football, because that's how I projected them. Now, the one area might change, might be the top 40 would get adjusted a little. Maybe a team that had a brutal schedule might finish a little higher than I expected. A team that had a very light non-conference schedule, I was expecting 4-0 on, they might not get there because the overall conference record is there. But so take the top 40, and that may have got hit a little, but everything else perfect as far as the conference records.
Gotcha. We love doing poll questions and questions of the day, either or, here on the 757 at 6. And who better to do it with than the football forecaster extraordinaire here. Here's one for you, Phil. If I give you option A of taking either Clemson or Alabama to win the national championship, the next one, or option B, the field outside of Clemson or Alabama, which way you going?
I'm going B. I'm definitely taking B in that one.
Really?
And I think Alabama and Clemson both make the playoff this year. I think there's plenty of teams out there that can get there. And in fact, the team I picked number 1 in the magazine comes outside that box. So that would be part of my reason I jumped on that. I watched Ohio State play Clemson last year, and I thought Ohio State outplayed Clemson in the bowl game. They settled for a bunch of short field goals, leaving Clemson in the game, and had some missed opportunities. And I think when you look at Ohio State and Clemson this year, they are the 2 teams I project to be in the title game this year. But I'll take my chances. I'll go with Ohio State in that one.
There you go. We have a Buckeye from the 757 and Taraja Mitchell, linebacker from Virginia Beach there for them. And they also had one not too long ago with Jalen Holmes, now the NFL's Minnesota Vikings. So plenty of the Ohio State University fans across Hampton Roads here. A few more minutes with Phil Steele, the college football expert himself, here on the 757 at 6 on ESPN Radio 94.1. PhilSteele.com is the website. Go get the College Football Preview magazine, which is on newsstands. You can also check out everything and subscribe to his website again at PhilSteele.com. Phil, give me a team that's emerging that may not be on the national radar but will be soon enough, and then also a player that's on the cusp who could put himself in the Heisman race.
I'll start with the player, then I'll go with the team.
Okay.
And the player I'm going to talk about is De'Aaron King. And he was off the radar last year because he started for Houston 4 games and opted to redshirt and pretty much got out of everybody's thought process. But if you watch De'Aaron King play, especially in 2018, this guy's a dynamic playmaker that just needed a great surrounding cast. Well, now he transferred to Miami of Florida. They have a great surrounding cast. I like the offensive line, the skill positions of running back and receiver. And Miami's got the schedule this year where they could get to double-digit wins, contend for the ACC title, and that would make him a player in the Heisman. And nobody's talking about him, but he could emerge and get there. And as far as the team goes, I've had a pretty good record with the surprise teams. You go back to a few years back, we had Washington making the playoff, and Washington did indeed make the playoff. 2 years ago, I had Notre Dame, a non-top 10 team, making the playoff, and Notre Dame made the playoff. Heck, last year I had Utah, and I'm watching the Pac-12 title game. If Utah wins that thing, they're in the playoff, and there's a non-top 10 team. So pretty good track record with them, and this year I'm going with Texas A&M. And with Texas A&M, it goes back to my conversation with Coach Jimbo Fisher last year. Two things stood out to me. The first was they had very few seniors on the squad whatsoever, so I knew they were a young team. And the second was the schedule. Brutal schedule, and last year they ended up playing the number 1 ranked Clemson, number 1 ranked Alabama, number 1 ranked LSU, 3 number 1 teams in the same season, plus the number 4 and the number 8 teams with a young team. And so naturally they lost 5 games last year. Well, I told Coach Fisher at the end of the call last year, I said, I'm going to put you on my national cover next year. Well, here it is next year. And Texas A&M now has 17 returning starters, a veteran senior quarterback in Kellen Mond, the number 13 rated offensive line, number 12 rated defensive line. He's got 3 recruiting classes, 3 outstanding recruiting classes at Texas A&M. And then how about the schedule? It drops to number 66 on my schedule this year. They might only play 1 top 10 team all year. So a much easier schedule, much more veteran team, plenty of talent. And last year when I looked at LSU, I said they're going to be favored in 11 games. The only game they're not is at Alabama. I can say the same thing about Texas A&M this year. They're going to be favored in all their games. The only one they're not going to be favored in is at Alabama. So if they could pull off the same thing, it's a simple little thing, just go into Tuscaloosa, come out with a win, all of a sudden you're in the playoff.
Makes plenty of sense with the amount of 4 stars and 5 stars that Jimbo has brought into College Station. I try to come up with that national surprise or sleeper outside of a Power 5 league every year. One year it might be a Hawaii or a Boise State, a San Diego State, and I love watching those teams late at night, as I'm sure you do at times, Phil. And the team I'm loving this year, I've got pinpointed in that category, is Louisiana Lafayette. How'd the Ragin' Cajuns look to you?
Loaded. And, yeah, they definitely have that opportunity. In fact, if you look at Louisiana, they're a team that last year did it the way I like it done. I mean, they ran the football at will, and they've got plenty of talent coming back at running back position and on the offensive line. Now, they lose a pretty good player in Raymond Calais, but talking to Coach Napier last year, he said, watch out for Chris Smith. If he's able to get the football at all, he could be a factor. They've got Mitchell back. They've got Regis back, a couple of basically 1,000-yard running backs back. And Chris Smith is going to plug into Calais' spot there at running back. The offensive line, last year they lost 3 starting offensive linemen to injury. This year, they're a much more veteran group, even more veteran group, as provided they stay healthy. They have a number 11 rated offensive line in the country. Defensively, here's a player nobody knows about, Taylon Humphrey, but coach is real wild about him. He's going to have a big year. He's 6'5", 335 at nose tackle. I think he's going to get sacks, tackles, everything you want, be very disruptive. So they have a very good defense, and this could be the year. I mean, Napier stepped into a decent situation. He's got to the Sun Belt title game each of the last 2 years and then come up just short against App State. This could be the year they knock the door down, and that would give them a great shot, especially if they come out with 2 wins over App State in the same year.
Phil Steele, he's an encyclopedia of information when it comes to college football, probably the only guy in the country that can give you as much on Notre Dame, Alabama, UVA, and Virginia Tech as Old Dominion, Louisiana Lafayette, Liberty, and so many more here. Final one for you, Phil, and I greatly appreciate the time here on the 757 at 6. I'd be remiss with this being such a transient military area, as you know, without asking about Navy and Army. So give me your thumbnails on the Midshipmen and the Black Knights.
Great year for Navy last year, wasn't it? I mean, Coach Niamatalolo had a team that struggled the previous year, and then all of a sudden Malcolm Perry emerged, and so did Navy. Navy ended up going from a 3-win team to an 11-win team and looked dominant at times and came out of there with a bowl win. Now, much like with Virginia, that would be my biggest question mark because, let's face it, Malcolm Perry was a huge part of that offense last year. Can they find somebody that's going to be that dynamic? I don't think so. But the surrounding talent's good. They're deep at fullback with Carruthers and Smith. The offensive line looks solid. And the thing about Navy and Army are they're two teams that rarely return a lot of starters. Last year, they had 8 returning starters, 9 returning starters the previous year. This year, they got 13 returning starters, 6 on offense, 7 on defense. So it's a somewhat veteran Navy team. Diego Fago at the linebacker spot is one of the best in the country. I think Navy can be a player in the American Conference despite the fact they lose their star quarterback. And with Army, wow. You know, they were a team that was a double-digit win team for a couple of years. And I talked in length with their head coach, Monken, and he said that probably the main thing that went wrong with Army last year, they put a lot of eggs in that Michigan basket week 2. They were expecting an undefeated season last year. They knew they had to beat Michigan. They were fired up. They took that game to overtime. They had their opportunities, and they lost. And the rest of the season sort of snowballed on them. They finished 5-8. You have an angry Coach Monken this year, though. He wants to rebound and rebound big, and I think they've got the talent to do so as well. In fact, when you look at Army, once again, they're a team that doesn't usually return a lot of starters, but they've got 12 starters back this year. Defensively, they're going to be much stronger. They lost their defense coordinator last year. They've got a new defensive coordinator this year. I think they will be better on defense, led by Amadio West up front of the D-line. And I see Army definitely getting back to a bowl and potentially getting back to one of those 8, 9, 10-win seasons that they had prior to last year's disappointing 5-8 year.
The very best in the business when it comes to college football analysis and forecasting, Phil Steele. Tell them one more time how they can get a copy of the magazine, subscribe, and see all your work, my friend.
I appreciate that, Matthew. Once again, different distribution this year. If you're used to going out to Walmarts and places like that and picking up the magazine, don't bother. You're not going to find them there. It's only at 2 spots, Barnes & Noble and Books A Million. So if you have Barnes & Noble, Books A Million in the area, head over there, scoop up a copy. And remember, we printed only about 25% of the copies that we normally do, so they're going to sell out pretty quick. Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. And you can also go online, philsteele.com. And if you go to philsteele.com tonight and order the magazine, we'll ship it out to you tomorrow, and you will get it within 1 to 3 days. It's sent out priority mail. You'll have this thing 352 pages. It's heavy, isn't it, Matthew?
Oh, it is. Rock solid.
It's 352 pages. And we give you the same amount of coverage at Old Dominion and Liberty that we give you on Oklahoma and Alabama. And I think that sets us apart from all the other magazines. All the information, same spot on every page.
It really does do a great job. The Phil Steele College Football Preview is out. Thank you so much for all the time. We wish you all the best. Stay safe and healthy, and we'll touch base down the road, all right?
Sounds great, Matthew. Always enjoy our conversations, my friend. Great talking football with you tonight.
Same here. Phil Steele, the college football guru himself, right here on the 757 at 6, talking all kinds of college football with you on ESPN Radio 94.1.